Doc Slab Audio on music production and audio engineering. Welcome to Doc Slab Audio and our Insights series. I do believe this is the 26th video in our Insights series, and in this video we want to talk about simplifying our musical theory for our productions. So first of all and foremost, I have a link on my channel to where I teach music theory from the standpoint of the piano and the guitar, basic and advanced and abstract theory. But I've come to understanding that a whole lot of people that I see that are doing the type of productions they're doing, that they don't need such advanced theory and need a much better and more simplified understanding of music theory and a good understanding of it to do the type of productions they're doing, because they're not utilizing really advanced theory and they're just lacking an understanding of the basic foundations. So we're going to look at this from the standpoint of the guitar, but it could be the same with the piano or any instrument. And we're going to look at Western music. We're going to say the basic foundation is your major scale and its relative minor. So whenever we talk about the major scale and its relative minor, they're the same scale and they have the same basic tonal chords. So whenever we look at that, we'll say, let's say we're looking at this in G. So if we have G and we're looking at G major scale, and this can be movable anywhere. We could talk about it. You can move this, start the foundation as G, so the first note would be G, or it would be A, or B, or C, or any note. And these would be the notes in that scale. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, back to G. Those are the notes, and that's it. And the basic major chords in there, the basic chords, major and minor, are G major, the first chord would be major, the second chord would be minor, A minor, the third chord would be minor, say B minor, then the fourth chord would be major, so we'd have C major, the fifth chord would be major, say D major, the sixth chord would be minor, say E minor, in case of G, and there's that seventh one that's up here, right before it goes back to E, would be the note right before G, and that's a half diminished, which you really use a lot sometimes. Now, with that understanding that the really simple concept, if you got major, you start in G here, its relative minor is 3 half steps down. 1, 2, 3 to E, open E there. So the major chords in there are going to be G, C, and D. Now that's when you want to work major. Now using the same chords in the same scale, and you want it to be minor, you would go E, A, B. And when you're working major, it's more happy, light stuff. When you're doing minor, it's more dark, sad kind of stuff. And those are your foundations. Anytime you want to make it less restrictive, you would add one of the major or minor chords in. So say I'm in G major, and my basic chords are G, C, and D. But I might add an E minor in there, or an A minor, or a B minor, to make it less restrictive of major. And it would be the same thing if I did it with minor. I might add a G major, or a C major, or a D major to make it less restrictive minor. Now, this gives us a really good solid foundation. That way, those basic chords are the chords we resolve to and the chords that we go to catch when we're not getting anywhere, to try to catch us back into scale and key, and those notes the same way, whether we're dealing with notes or the scale, okay, or the notes or the tonal chords. So with that concept, that very much simplifies your theoretical foundations. That way you can explore anywhere you want with any notes or any chords, just as long as you come back there. So let's say strict major. I've got a G major chord, right? G major chord, and I go to like D flat diminished, a different chord that's not in G major. And then it resolved back to like that D major. Oh yeah. And if it was minor, it was relative minor, E, or if I play G minor, it would be like G minor to that D flat diminished. Ooh, back to maybe that D or C minor. Oh yeah, right? But those are the foundations. Anytime I want to be less restrictive, major or minor, I would go like, say, G major, and then an experimental chord in there that's not a tonal chord, that D flat augmented or diminished, and then I would go out of that and go maybe to the A minor. Oh yeah, and then resolve back to that D major. So it keeps it major, but it's not so restrictive major. So I'm trying to keep that concept as simple as possible so that you gravitate towards the major or minor modes, like I just showed you, and if you want it less restrictive, use one of the other major or minor chords to make it less restrictive major or minor, and then you can put any chord in there you want, or any note. Here's those notes, right? So any one of those notes, I could use this note. I could use any note, but I want to resolve back into some of those other notes somewhere, right? So that I'm always coming back to those foundations somewhat, okay? And it's the same thing with those basic chords. That way, you can go anywhere you want with notes, you can go anywhere you want with chords, but just keep that your foundation. That way, if you get moving around, you're like going, well, I've got this G major, but I went to this D flat minor, or D flat diminished, and then I went to this E flat 7th chord. Ooh, that's cool. Oh yeah, but I gotta get it resolved back somewhere, so I'm gonna drop back to that D major. Oh yeah, resolve, bro. Back to that major, and if I don't want it so, in the inflection so major, I might go from that E flat 7th to an A minor. Oh yeah, back to C major. Back to D major. Yeah. Does that make sense? That way, restrictive major or minor, or less restrictive major or minor, and using any chord you want, or any note you want, it keeps your foundation simple. That way, you're free to explore your emotions and feelings anywhere you want to go. Just, you have those foundations to fall back on. That way, that wherever you go, you start sounding disconnected, discombobulated all over the place, that you can fall back there. So if you're using non-tonal chords, like diminished, or augmented, or you're using a 7th chord or some other chord, or use some other scale. Maybe you're going to use a minor scale. Maybe you want to experiment with scales. You got the major pentatonic scale, you want to use the minor, and you want to go, there's major, minor, and minor, minor. You're going to play like G major, stay in major, and then you go to your D major, but you want to go make it less restrictive. You can go to A minor. Oh yeah, and you're going to use that A minor pentatonic in there in your melody lines. But you want to resolve back to that major, like the C major. Back to D major. And then maybe use the A major scale to help fill that, tie it together. Yeah, dude. So you can mix and match all that stuff, but you're always trying to fall back in there somewhere. Either constrictive major, constrictive minor, or less constrictive major minor by using one of the other major minor chords, and then just go wherever you want. Does that make sense? The better you get at understanding the theory and the notes and the scales and different chords and all these things, you'll start interweaving all kinds of different stuff to where you can get into stuff like the blues scale, melodic scales, harmonic scales, diminished scales, augmented scales, whole tone scales, all kinds of different scales to where you might be playing major, G, and then go like this, but then you go to this D flat diminished, and then you use a D diminished scale to do some little melodic thing or melody thing that falls back to A minor, and then back into melody that's, G scale, melody. Does that make sense? So these make your theory constructs very simple to work from. As you get better at theory, as you get better at implementing that, and as you get better at exploring and be able to resolve back and have things sound really good, that your theoretical concepts will become more complicated. Some people are mathematical or theoretical geniuses, and it's really complicated. A lot of the productions I see don't need all that, because they just really need to, you know, get that basic understanding and then explore, but have a safety net there to come back to help things resolve, to have somewhere to go when they get stuck, to have some basic foundations to where it's like melody lines. And if they want to do some kind of minor pentatonic with it, ooh, I put a blues line in there with that G major scale, A minor pentatonic with that G major scale, and then I'm gonna come back to that G, or I'm gonna come back to that D, or I'm gonna come back to that C major, or I'm gonna, you know, use less restrictive major inflections, and I'm gonna use that E minor. Yeah, back to that D major, to have a resolve kind of back to the major inflections. It can be the same thing working with minor. So it's a very simple concept. It's a very simple ideology to really simplify your theory so that you spend way more time on stuff like abstract theory. Abstract theory is very simply that it's a G major, but I'm going to use this other note, or I'm going to use this other chord, that diminished chord or the other note that's not in scale. Either way, that's an abstract theoretical concept. It's not in key, it's not in scale, but you use it. They just got to resolve it back in there somehow. We got basic constructs to work from, to fall back into and resolve to, so your stuff just doesn't wander off aimlessly all over the place. So I hope I made that real simple, and I certainly hope that helps a lot of you out there that really do not need ridiculously constrictive and complex theory to work from to get you going. And you can always branch out. Theory is a great place to have fun, but don't get lost in it. Peace, self-love. I certainly hope you enjoyed this next video in our Insight series, and I will see you in the next video.